Alright guys, hello, g'day, how are you all? This is the big episode. This is the big train line episode that is going to influence anything else that we build within the city from here on end. This is as important as the roads, as important as the landscape, the big three: landscape, roads, train lines. And I'm also excited because out of all the years that I've played Cities Skylines, I have never started a city quite like this before. Because the thing is, we are very much limited to building a city at its current state. This is how it looks in 2024. We don't really have anything in terms of historical buildings. And of course, I get it. I mean, if we were starting at the very founding moments of the city, then I think it'd be a pretty complicated game. However, I do then think that we miss out on these key moments that shape the way the city looks. You can place down old buildings and historical landmarks, but the history is ingrained in the layout of the city and the neighborhoods and the places that don't exist anymore. And the remnants, they might be super small, they might just be the influence they've had on this modern city, or maybe they're just poking through just a little bit. But you notice it, and it's always super fun. But let's be real. The thing that we all know and love, the thing that we're here for, and yes, I'm talking about we, it's not just me, I know your little secret, you love this just as much as I do. You just notice some overgrown viaducts, an old tunnel, and maybe an old trench. Oh, this is pretty interesting. Suddenly, these wharves make sense. A train used to go through here, and through here, and through here, and over this old bridge, because it used to lead to this. And now the light rail makes sense. And, wait, hold on. I'm in a completely different city now. Where's New York City? Ugh. Alright, I guess what I'm trying to say is, I've gone down a bit of a rabbit hole, and I'm gonna take you guys with me. Welcome back to Dollarton. Alright, I've been hyping this up quite a bit, but that is because I am genuinely very, very hyped about this. This is what I am most excited about in Cities Skylines 2, is the layout, not just with the roads, but also with the train lines, because I do think that these features are definitely way more fleshed out than anything else. So you might be wondering, well, if we're kind of influencing the city's layout with this train line, isn't that something you should have thought about way long ago? Well, dear viewer, I actually have been. Behind the scenes, I've been chipping away at a bit of a map just to start planning out some areas, and then also already influencing some of these roads, because I actually have been dragging out some pretend train lines. Yeah. You see this little alleyway down here? Well, that's actually going to be a train line. Because like I mentioned in the intro, so many of these older cities are very much influenced by these old train lines that used to snake their way throughout the place, because so many of these cities were built around industry and trade routes. And when these trains were first on the scene, you know, when cities started to be really influenced by the locomotive and were starting to build all these train lines throughout the cities to feed into the wharves and to really just transport all these goods from one city to another, from across the world and across the countries. This is kind of how the cities became so influenced, because this is when you really saw that boom in, you know, these places. And back in the day, cities like this, they weren't very desirable, you know? This is like a place that was very smoggy, this was a place that was very noisy and quite industrial. This was not the greatest of places to live in. This was definitely a place of trade and of industry, and it was all fed by this rail line that was very much influencing the way that the city operated and the way that the city looked. And a lot of it is there's still quite a lot of remnants. You know, the train line isn't really much of a thing anymore in Jersey City. This is something that is definitely being pushed out. You know, all the industry is, well, actually, I guess it's still kind of close, but it's definitely not in the same area. It's definitely not going into the CBD of this place anymore. We are now looking at luxury apartments and parks, and definitely it's a real shift in the way that this place looks. However, I think that in order to create my own version of this, I really need to, you know, disconnect roads because a train line is there. I need to industrialize a shorefront because I need to figure out where that line was once going. Which is why, and I can't stress this enough, that we are going to be making such a mess of the city. Not that it's very well organized or that it looks particularly nice. It's got to be messed up for this reason. You know, we got to be disconnecting roads and really just changing the way neighborhoods and communities look, and even the industrial areas. I want these to really change because I've got to drag out these lines. I've got to figure out where they used to be, where they might still exist. You know, what are we going to be keeping around here? That's a question to you guys. Do we keep all of it because I do quite like seeing a lot of train lines around. But then I also think that a lot of these areas are going to be abandoned because eventually it'd be kind of fun to have a lot of abandoned lines sitting around and maybe being turned into parks or maybe just sitting abandoned for quite some time. Who knows? Still trying to figure that out, but it's all exciting territory. The original plan was to stick this big bad boy around here, but it just felt a little bit out of place, a little bit too large for what I was going for, so I decided to get rid of it, and I'll instead place that somewhere else in the same area. I did want to see trains making their way across this train line and connecting up this area. This is going to be a very big industrial area that is going to have a lot of wharves, and probably the main port of the city is going to sit here too. So there will be a space where we're going to be having quite a lot of industry, and it's all going to still be functional and not abandoned and all that. But this particular space, I think that this is going to be possibly an abandoned train line and an abandoned wharf. And what I'm taking inspiration from is, of course, a very similar thing that's going on in Jersey City. This was a massive industrial area, and that's pretty much all the knowledge that I have of this. It did look like a very impressive train station. I'm assuming that it was for cargo. And I guess this is a good time to now say that I'm not a great train guy. You know, I appreciate trains, but there's going to be a lot of very knowledgeable people in the comment section and watching this video that are going to have a much better understanding of trains and probably a better appreciation as well. I'm a train appreciator for sure. Like, I think I probably enjoy abandoned train lines more than I enjoy functional. Who knows? Maybe I enjoy both of them. But I just think that these abandoned lines are just so fascinating because it does kind of like sparkle this interest and imagination of what it used to be and what it used to be for. And you can start piecing together all these connections and history, and it gives you a really good idea of what the city once used to look like. And I think that's why I like abandoned areas, because I think it just kind of gives you a little bit of a peep into what this area used to look like. This particular spot in Jersey City is now a park, and you can also still visit that old train station that sits up there. You can even see little bits of the wharf and the wharves that used to kind of creep into this river, and it's just so interesting. I really wish I went to Jersey City when I visited New York City many years ago. I think maybe like 5 or 6 years ago. I also ran into Besquigglehausen there as well, which is kind of cool. But I wish I made my way over to Jersey City because I've just grown a really big appreciation for all the things that are over here, and even just everything that's over on the other side of the Hudson River. I didn't go to this area at all. You know, of course, a lot of the industry that I have in the city will end up getting pushed out, but a lot of it will stay. And I think when we start getting some assets being created for Cities Skylines 2 and the Paradox mods is available, and even when we start getting some DLCs and stuff, I'm going to be adding in way more old and abandoned and just rough around the edges types of buildings, because I think that's the version that I want to create. Something that is not the nicest of places, definitely areas of gentrification and, niceness. Some areas are going to be, very sought after to live in, but then other areas I think won't be. And I really love that contrast, and I think that's what I was kind of hoping to see a bit more in when I went to New York, but hey, probably a good thing. Now, I know it looks like I just blitzed through those wharves, but it actually took quite some time to align things up and to get it all right, and it's far from being all right. But I'm going to leave it at that because otherwise we'll be here all day, and I already do too much in this episode, that's for sure. I want to move on to another section of track that was on the other side of the river. I felt like we needed something else around here. I couldn't just rely on that one train line going through the heart of New Dimesburg. I felt like I needed something else. Over in Bayonne, there's a little old train bridge that I was taking some ideas from, but I was actually a little bit more interested in where this train line was going. It was kind of stretching out this way, and there is some industry over here. But if you follow it a little bit further, you can kind of make out, hey, look at that. That was totally an old bridge. I figured this was probably a little bit closer to what we're building down here. I like the fact that it's up on this little peninsula, and it stretches along a pretty decent journey and connects up this whole other section. So I really like it. So I decided to build something kind of similar. But first thing I wanted to do though was just figure out a little bit more of these roads that were stretching throughout this little suburb that You know, I've asked you guys in the last episode, what do we do with these roads? And I actually think that I really like the idea that a part of this main road actually stretches towards this industrial site that I think that's actually probably been there for quite some time. So I think we're going to kind of connect it up on the left-hand side, so it does still connect up to that industrial area, but then this other road is going diagonally throughout this suburb and is going to be connecting up our version of Staten Island and going along a little bit of a bridge, and perhaps at some point we will stretch out a highway through there, and who am I kidding? Of course we are. Now this train bridge, of course, is going to have a really low clearance. There's just going to be one section that you're just going to have to imagine there would be some sort of drawbridge that would open and close as boats need to travel through it. And, you know, of course, at some point, if we were going to have anything in terms of a big port that's within this bay, would probably have to demolish this bridge or turn it into something that is definitely a little bit higher up, because I don't think any of these big ships could pass underneath it. This is more for some smaller boats going underneath. But yeah, of course, we have to use our imagination here. Unfortunately, we have nothing in terms of drawbridges. I'm really hoping that at some point, not just with PDX mods, but, you know, it looks like we're going to get some sort of content pack that's going to include some bridges. So perhaps we'll include something like that. But I just think that's a real bummer, you know, because that would be so fun. And of course, you couldn't really do that in Cities Skylines 1, but there were mods and assets that allowed it, which was pretty nuts. I have no idea how they did that, but they did. Pretty bloody awesome if you ask me. This little spot down here, I decided that this would be the area that we placed down our very first cargo terminal. We're going to be placing multiple of these throughout this city, but this will be the first one. And it's going to be kind of interesting to see some trains just making their journey throughout this city. I think it's going to be very lovely. That's something we'll focus on in the live play, but for the rest of this area, it's a whole bunch of industry and just a couple little snaky train lines just getting their way around this little area, which is super nice. And with that, this whole area is looking pretty good. It was all pretty much complete, but I have to admit, this was the easy part. The rest of the line was gonna have to make its way throughout this whole city. Yeah, this was for sure not easy. Trying to navigate this train line around these roads and the buildings and just trying to get it around places was really tricky. I was pretty prepared though. I did have a really good idea of whereabouts I wanted these lines to be going in the first place. I've been mapping them out on my iPad and just trying to get a really good idea of where things are going. And it's not random. It's all based on this excellent map. This is Jersey City in the 1930s, including Hoboken and Union City and Bayonne, all these places. You can see the colored lines. This is all the industrial train lines that used to navigate all throughout this place, and just gives you a really good idea of just how much train line there really was. It's honestly so impressive to think that this was all here at some stage, and now Jersey City looks like this, and there is of course remnants of it, and you can still see little pockets of that infrastructure still in places. Even where you don't see the train line, you can still see the influence that it had on the city. It's just so interesting, and this was very, very helpful. And I'm going to put this to you guys because I don't do a huge amount of research, to be honest. Like, this is the most amount of research I've done. It's pretty much just look at this map, and that's about it. That's all I'm pretty much doing. But regardless, I decided to use this network to create my own version. Creating these colored lines really helped to plan out where this industrial area sat, and also give me a good idea of how they fed into these areas. So for instance, this line that goes all the way through the heart of New Dimesburg, and I mean the heart of it, like this is exactly where the downtown is. This would have been a very important line that would have stretched all the way through these wharves. And I felt like by giving this line a color, I was also making sure that it was connected to an outside connection so that there was a direct route into this area and that it fed right into the industrial zone. It wasn't just completely random like I would drag out other train lines. Now, of course, all of this is, you know, I don't know how long this is going to stay here for. This is very much just like okay, this was here, this is what we are working with, and how is it going to influence all the rest of these wharves? And what else will we put here? You know, will this be eventually a light rail system? Will this be worked into some sort of park, or will this just be sat abandoned? Or do we have industry here? Who knows? You tell me. But with this notion that each line that I am creating has some sort of purpose, that it leads to an industrial area, and that it's, you know, maybe it's privatized. I don't know how train lines really work. This is pretty much just me just looking at Google Earth and a couple of maps and kind of giving it a go. But I really like this. I feel like this gives it so much more meaningful purpose behind, you know, it's not just random, and it's not just, well, I guess it's still maybe a touch random, but this is definitely the most amount of thought I've put into this. So, I mean, that's a pretty good thing, right? But I'd love to know from you guys, because I'm sure you're going to have some really great ideas when it comes to the purpose behind this line, many of the lines that we create. You can see the colors, you can see where they head towards, but where do they go elsewhere, and what was their purpose? Like, you have any ideas, please let me know, because it would be great to make connections between, you know, something we're mining out in the hills and then something that is out this way, or are there buildings I can place down that you think would work really well? Or, you know, backstories, or even what they could potentially be in the future. Let me know, because I feel like that's the sort of connections that we need to start making now that we're starting to get a lot of the city established. I feel like that's the next step, trying to get the story behind the reasons why they were here in the first place. I love that stuff. Now you can see down here, we've made a very big divide where the train line heads out of the city. There's a big trench. It's really cut up our city, and the only roads that are stretching across it, the bridges that we have, these are the main roads, the ones that are going towards the important stuff. The next thing that we needed to create just to finish off this area was a bit of a connection, just a tiny little bridge that connected up this trench that we created at the very beginning of the episode to this one that we're building at the moment. And as small as this was going to be, it's a total headache. Like, this was a real pain to connect up, and the clearance was just not right. I want this to be so much more than it is at the moment. This is all inspired by this area in Jersey City. I really love this. This is like the whole combination of train lines, and they kind of interact, but then they also kind of don't. They kind of avoid each other in some areas. So I am definitely doing something a little bit different, because they are connecting up. And I guess this is sort of similar to what it used to do, but who knows? I mean, I'm just trying to create this little section so that it makes a bit more sense within this context. And again, I want this to be a whole lot different than what it is at the moment. I mean, this whole train line, I want it to be rusty and old and, you know, just far different. And eventually, when we start getting those juicy mods and assets, then yeah. But for now, we got this one. This bridge is looking pretty fine, pretty good, serving a purpose. Definitely harder than it looks. A bit wonky, but she'll do. The trench leading out of the city, this was going to be a pretty thick one. This was going to be one that was going to see quite a lot of train traffic. It was not going to be the only one going out of the city in this direction. We're going to do another one in just a little bit. But this one, it's a big boy. This one's going to be four lanes on a train line. Yeah, I'm sticking with it. But this was going to be serving quite a lot of purposes. This was also heading towards the depot, which was, of course, going to see quite a lot of train traffic at some point. This might even serve passenger at some point as well. I haven't quite decided that yet. So I wanted to make sure that we had a fair bit of infrastructure down here, as well as leaving some other areas a little bit open, because I think some junctions might be needed, as well as just fleshing out what some of these little parts are going to look like. But yeah, this line's a pretty important one, and I wanted it to be a little bit inspired by this section, which I think is super interesting. There is just a whole network of train lines that I absolutely love, and it's a section that eventually becomes elevated and stretches across this little river, which is what we're going to do as well. As it stretches across this little river, this is where things are going to get pretty interesting and hectic and probably dysfunctional. I mentioned that the train depot is out this way, and there is going to be a direct connection there too, but I really want this place to be very chaotic and just a lot of industry, a lot of different directions that the trains are kind of having to navigate and get around, as well as a whole bunch of bridges too. There is just this whole network of bridges that stretch across this little river, and I love this. This is the Hackensack River, which I've already mentioned that I absolutely adore this place. I think this place is just so interesting, so cool. Lots of history, love these old bridges. But I want to do something similar where we've got a whole bunch of old bridges and bridges that have been updated and upgraded and just changing, you know, a lot of change. But at the moment, it's just the good old days. We're going to have a whole bunch of just bridges just making their stretch across here. I make a really simple connection to the train depot, but I wasn't really that satisfied with it. I felt like we needed to make some changes to the bridges and the way that they were navigating across this river. I felt like it could make a little bit more sense, but I also don't want it to be super simple, you know? I want this to be all over the place. So this is where I end up devoting a lot of the time in this episode, where I try and figure out how on earth these bridges are going to stretch across our version of the Hackensack River, because these are a whole bunch of seriously old bridges. These were, you know, a lot more train bridges that stretched across here, because that was the most important part, you know, trying to get this freight from this other side to our, you know, to the city, to where all the industry was at. So trying to figure out how those bridges were kind of stretching across here, as well as this other bridge that was, you know, for cars. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to drag out these lines. How are they getting across here? And, you know, trying to do something that is a little bit old school, trying to figure out the best possible way. This was a lot of fun, but I have to admit, I sunk a lot of hours into it. As well as many versions of this. I was trying to get just the right combination of bridges. I wanted it to feel pretty cluttered. I wanted there to be quite a lot of them, and almost like too many, you know, maybe at some point one of them won't be used anymore, or we'll have to like repurpose it, or who knows, maybe it becomes abandoned or something. But at the moment, I wanted to truly represent just an uncomfortable amount of bridges. And I also wanted it to be a good design, but then flawed. I didn't want this to be perfect, and I wanted it to represent, you know, ideas and designs that would have been done back in the day. So something that isn't too modern. Because, you know, obviously a big old highway stretching across here that was just all elevated and just totally missed all these train lines would make a lot of sense for this road. But no, I kind of wanted it to be a little bit inconvenient. Back when it was built, not as much car traffic and probably more loosey-goosey road rules, so probably wouldn't have been such a problem having some of the things that I'm about to build. But now, not so much. It's now kind of inconvenient, and we'll have to upgrade it when things get a little bit more out of hand. So that's why we have a pretty inconvenient train crossing right on this bridge, where I think it's going to get a little bit hectic when things get a little bit hectic. But for now, I think it's kind of fun. And then we've also got this elevated section, this little bridge. And this was the winning combination. I think that this is a pretty fun design, and I think it is going to be a lot of fun when we start upgrading things and changing things, and definitely adding in some assets, because at the moment, these train bridges aren't really cutting it for me. It's a real damn shame that we don't have anything else, but hey, this is what we got to work with it. And with that, it was time to get back into the city and finish off the train line that we had started. I wanted there to be a little section of track that was going to be connecting up and kind of going across the city, because there was going to be a whole other section, whole other little spot that was going to be heading across the city right past this little cliffside. This is inspired by this whole section that you can see that used to exist around Jersey City, and now you don't really see it anymore. There's obviously little pockets and a couple of really interesting elevated sections and bridges that still remain that really puzzled me, because I couldn't actually figure out where they were connected up to, and it's a real maze and a real network down here, you know. I think that this map really helps just to kind of make sense of it all and where it used to go, and, you know, why some sections have track that don't really align up. And, you know, I really love that. I love it for this area. So I kind of want to do something similar. Not to mention that I had planned to create some more industry that was connected up with this rail line, and it was going to sit on the other side of the river and of the city. So I kind of needed the train line to head in this direction. Plus, I wanted to have something that represented this little area. How cool is this? I didn't know what it was all about over here before, and when I started to, make some connections with all the rail lines, I realized that this is a whole trench and there are some really old tunnels that sit in this little area, and you probably wouldn't even notice it. This is the sort of area that you could totally live here and not even realize that there is an abandoned train line that used to stretch under here, and it's just so cool. So I wanted to do something similar. This is going to be much tighter and much smaller, and probably a lot lower down than the other section that we have. So I wanted it to be different. I didn't want it to be too similar. And this is going to another, this is going to be like a whole other network. So, when talking about those lines, this is going to be quite separate to the other trench that we created. I don't think it's going to have any lines that really interact with that. This is kind of doing its own thing. And again, I don't know if I'm going to keep this or whether it's going to become abandoned. Who knows? A big chunk of me kind of likes the fact that we are going to see trains actually navigating this area, but then a part of me just likes abandoned train lines, so I don't know. I was pretty happy to see that all the roads were pretty easily reconnected to the other side. I obviously don't want every road going over there, but I sort of feel like this is the area that this train line is very much hidden. Though at the moment, it's very much exposed. You can see this one pretty well. So obviously we are going to be changing a lot of this with some mods that allow us to plant some trees and just get a little bit more creative, in some of these areas. So don't get too used to the way things look. This is about as bare bones as it's ever going to look. I spent a pretty good amount of time trying to connect up this little section to the train line that stretches across the city, the one that is heading to a completely different area that I haven't really figured out yet, but I did know that I wanted just a whole bunch of windy elevated track to be sitting around here, and I made a pretty good connection. Some of these things I didn't even really plan to do, they just kind of happened because I was already in the area, so it kind of just worked. And it is just so nice when things work out like this, I didn't really expect it, but it was easy, super easy. Until I tried to drag the road over the top, which definitely needed to happen, and yeah, this isn't gonna happen. I tried a couple of different things to make it work, but yeah, there's just too many lines around here. I even think with Anarchy, I don't even know if this is something that's even going to look halfway decent. So I decided in the end that, you know what, I actually don't really need to connect it in the first place. I very much reckon that all of this is going to be abandoned anyway. So I just disconnected it in that area. I don't really need it to be connected anyway, and Bob's your uncle. How good's that? But anyway, that's about it for the time lapse. If this was a regular old school $2.20 video, then the video will be over, but we're only halfway through it. How good's that? Oh boy. Alright, we've made an absolute mess, and it's only going to get messier. At least next week when we start introducing some mods and some graphic settings, then things will look a whole lot nicer, but for now, things are looking pretty bad. But anyway, I think what we need to do is actually see some trains using our train line. Because of course we are going to have a lot of abandoned line, but I do want to see some action going on down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect up our cargo terminal, and we're going to get some cargo trains. And here are these bad boys. So it will take a little while until we start seeing some freight being taken into the city and vice versa. But for now, these guys are all taken care of. That's pretty much all I really need to do. However, I do need to just keep an eye and see just how busy this line gets, because we've only got the one connection. There's only one line going in to our city, so we might even have to connect up this one that goes over to Staten Island, because that would actually be a pretty easy connection just to make. You know what? Stuff it. Let's do it. Yes, and something that I remember about connecting this guy up is I dragged him out as a single line, so we don't have these double tracks, which is actually fine, because I actually want to work around it rather than making this double. I think we just commit and we just go straight with these single ones. It's going to cause some problems, but what we'll do, we'll do a bit of a corner here, bit of a turn, and then we'll get the doubles out, and we'll see if the trains actually just wait at these signals. I don't know if you can actually do signals in this game, but Let's just have a little look. And of course, that is a very simple connection. I don't think it's going to stay like that, but it's there for now, and I like it. Ooh, probably should change that. There we are. And you know what else I'm going to do? This is going to be overkill. I don't need this. This is purely because I just want to see more freight trains driving around, getting around our city. I am going to be placing another terminal, but I don't know how useful this is going to be. This is more like, okay, eventually I will have a better cargo terminal over this way. And I will also be detailing this up way better. You know, obviously this is going to be very, very bare bones. You know what, let's just keep it right down there. Right there. But yes, a bit of a silly addition, but we will have a cargo terminal right here. So I do like the idea that this is already acting the job. You know, this is something that's going to be here eventually anyway. So let's not wait. Let's just get this in. By the way, all this, temporary. Don't get used to it. All right, nothing here is permanent. I'm just going to do this. You see this area down here? If you have any ideas of how this could potentially look, feel free to just take a little screenshot, maybe from this angle, maybe from this angle. And if you've got some ideas or suggestions, please let me know, because we will be down here at some point, but all this needs to change. But at the moment, this is somewhat how I want it to function. You know, I like this. I like the fact that we have some crossings that we have to navigate. I like the fact that some sections that are a little bit busier are going to be up and raised above this road, which is going to be a little bit problematic. And all around here is going to be super industrial. So let's just dig in and zone out a little bit more industry. Okay, let's make all this a little bit more useful. At a later date, this line all around here is going to be quite different, and I reckon we'll have a train line that stretches all the way through here, which will be a little bit more in the sticks, and then this will be a bit more in the city or suburbs or whatever is going to be around here. Maybe even an airport. I think possibly an airport. But for now, I'm going to just keep it pretty simple, and we'll make it so that trains can actually just turn around, go both ways. So I'm going to do this. So simple. And this new terminal will be connected to an outside connection, the same one as the other guy, and we'll do vice versa, back and forth. And then what I'm also going to do is I'm going to make another one, and we'll connect him to our port. And let's just make sure that we have in fact dragged out the right connections, because they can be a little bit hard to see. So we'll make these different colors so we can actually tell what is doing what. And yes, I can tell just by having a look at the different routes that we are in fact really utilizing all those cargo terminals, those two and the outside connection. I don't know if it's going to be financially good, but I do think it's good to actually see trains getting around our city. Not that we can see any here or here. Ah, there's one. Well, would you look at that? He's waiting. Fantastic. And something else that I actually didn't really know too much about is the fact that these also change color depending on, there we go. These change color depending on the line that I have given them, like the color of the line. Now, I knew that for the passenger service, but I didn't know that the cargo service also did that. So with that in mind, I'm going to give these slightly dirtier colors, because this is cargo. I don't want them to be too clean. Yeah, that's much better. Alright, I think it's going to be a little while until we actually start to see some freight being shipped in and out of the city and around, so let's just give that a little bit of time and work on a couple of extra little things. So you see this little pizza slice we got going on down here that is sandwiched between all this rail? Well, we're going to increase the rail. Surprise, surprise. Yeah, there's gonna be a lot going on down here, but I actually think it'd be kind of fun to see a bit of a rail yard. Now, there once was a rail yard that sat in a pretty similar spot according to this map. I've seen a couple of other pictures that sort of show whereabouts it was, but I actually reckon it'd be really fun to put something like that around here. I don't think it's gonna be used. I mean, if I had some extra props and stuff, I'd probably place down a whole bunch of containers and stuff. Actually, hold on, look at this guy. Totally full. That's it. Attaboy. And again, I don't really know what I'm doing here. Like, this is purely just dragging out some train lines, and that's about it. Look, I'd be lying if I said I knew what I was doing. It's purely just for that spot used to be here. And if you're wondering why this is still open, well, I've got a bit of an idea for this little section. What you think about that little guy? Yeah, so this is inspired by this little island neighborhood that sits between all these rail lines. I mean, this is a pretty nice little spot. You're telling me you don't want to live here? I want to live here. I mean, surrounded by train lines. That is pretty nice if you ask me. So, this is going to be a bit of a neighborhood, but it's going to be a tight one. Luckily, I do have enough clearance to get over here. Because it is a bit of a tight one, I think I'm just going to do the one road that is coming over. And we'll leave that one disconnected, but what I'll do is... Actually, what am I going to do here? I think I'm going to use the little alleyways so I get a bit of extra space. Yeah, we'll probably do the 2x1 in terms of the row houses, and then we'll get another one that kind of goes there. Oh, we've got a little bit of space. We could probably squeeze in a couple more roads. By the way, look at these guys down here just minding their own business, letting each other in. Beautiful. Whoop. Where'd they go? Oh, darling, that is very, very nice. I'm loving that. That is a nice little neighborhood up there. I think I would definitely want to live there. However, I want to make a couple of changes. Now, obviously, this is still very, very early days. You know, it's bare bones. There's no trees, there's no detail, and they are all looking exactly the same, which I don't love. So, what I'm going to go through and do, and how am I meant to start that sentence? Maybe even a couple of medium density. Maybe a little corner shop here. Ah, yes. Oh, right here. Ah. That's all right. I still feel like we're missing a bit of variation, so I might try some single family housing as well, just to see what happens, and nothing happens. All right, fine. You win. But look, this is going to get very detailed over the next couple of weeks because I think just adding in some trees and bushes and just, oh, hello. Good. All right, the first widening of the roads. It's begun, but I think that actually looks a whole lot better, and it's probably going to function a whole lot better too. And you know, while I'm widening things, I am also going to just change the way that this train line works because we're getting this. See this? Not good. I mean, you could possibly get through. Ah, no, you can't. Your little tail's sticking out the end. So what I'm going to do is, and I think these guys are just going to disappear when I implement it, but I think it's going to just make things a little bit easier. All right, I think that's going to make things a little bit easier, and I think that trains are going to be able to navigate this a whole lot better. But I would like to just change 2 more things before I call this a success, and I guess I probably do need to see trains actually try and navigate this, not just the one, but multiple. But what I want to do is, I don't love this. Now, if this was Cities Skylines 1, I could just use move it. Of course, this is a mod, but I could actually just drag out that node. But with this one, I can't really do that. I would like this to be a whole lot smoother. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag a little network there just to create a node, and I'm going to change that to a single line, like so. We'll get rid of that. Might turn snapping back on, and I wonder if we can get a nice smooth transition. Ooh, that is much better. And here comes the moment of truth. How is this going to hold up? What's gonna happen? Attaboy. How good's that? Love it. Alright, so the trains are navigating this pretty well. Obviously, it's a bit tight. We have quite a lot of traffic, but I'm fine with that because it's kind of fun just to see all this train traffic, to be honest. Now, obviously, it's still pretty hairy in places. We do need to fix up some areas, but I'm going to leave it at that because I think as long as trains are navigating this pretty well, then I am all for it. But then also, you can imagine where we're going to be adding in extra train lines. So we've got this whole good space over here that we can use to connect up these 2 lines, or even completely bypass them, similar to what we're doing down here. You know, just because we've got train lines going in and out and kind of close by doesn't mean we have to connect them up. I also like the idea that they are their own path and they go to and lead to different areas. So I don't have to connect them up, but that will definitely be a bit of a junction there. And we're gonna do something really fun around here too, but that'll be for a later date. And then of course, we've also got all of this line, which I think is going to go through all of this underneath this little bridge and connect up all over here, but that's for a later date. But if you've got any ideas of how things could look around here, if you've got some suggestions, remember we are adding in train lines that reflect what it was like back in the day, back in the good old days where trains really ruled these cities. So, you know, I'm more than happy for them just to be dragged and connected up all over the place. That's kind of the point. But tell you what, as much as I love these train lines, things are definitely looking uglier than ever. It's about as ugly as can be. We have disconnected neighborhoods and we have completely demolished buildings and just made big trenches and just train line networks all over the place. Not to mention, we have caused absolute havoc on these roads. So, even this intersection that I fixed up, it's still not good. So yeah, we've got a few things to fix up in the next one, but most importantly, next episode, we're gonna get to detailing. Alright friends, thank you all so much for watching today's episode, very much appreciated. Please keep on sending in some suggestions about the train line throughout this city because I'm definitely going to need it, and there's so many possibilities for story ideas and what it could be repurposed into and connections that will maintain, not all of this is going to become abandoned, but I'm going to need your help with this. So let me know if you've got any suggestions, leave them down below. And I want to give a big shout out to some of the beloved people over on Patreon supporting the channel. One of the newest ones, SLS, AMG, 5th Scale, and then to some of my all-time longest supporters, Get of the God, Samuel Liu, Michael, Mike BR, Benjamin David, Oliver Assis, Christopher C. Penny, Alec Williams, Ollie Sovdi, Mike McFarlane, Robert Maynard, and Kira Floke. Cheers, legends. Really appreciate it, and I'll catch you all in the next one.